All right, welcome. My name is Guillaume Sanav. I am the Vice President of Partnerships and Channels and Alliances here at 3CLogic. It's my pleasure to have a couple key people join us in today's session. Paul Greenberg, otherwise known as the godfather of CRMs, and also my pleasure to introduce you 3CLogic's very own Chief Technology Officer, Vikas Nehru. Vikas, how are you?
Doing well, Chief.
So I know we, as a group, debated on a few different topics. We had a hard time, narrowing it down to just a few, given the fact that these are really, really interesting times. But obviously, COVID has sort of led the discussion with regards to its recent impact on technology, how people work, so on and so forth, and this whole emphasis of how digital transformation is getting accelerated. I'm curious, Paul, if we dive right into it, what is your take on sort of where digital transformation really resides? Is it happening? Has it accelerated? Has it even started? I'm kind of curious what your take is on there.
Well, if you kind of read all the extant literature out there and start listening to all the pundits, basically we're sprinting to the finish line for digital transformation, thanks to COVID-19 and thanks to the fact we all have to work from home and thanks to the fact operations are still running and regardless of that, et cetera, but that's not what's happening. I mean, look, what's happening now is we're using a lot more digital tools like the one we're on. I mean, you take Zoom, right? And Zoom went from 5 million, well, they actually were 2 million downloads kind of steadily. And then in one day they had 5 million downloads. Now they're up at, there's like 350 million users of Zoom or 400 million, something like that. But that's just using more tools to communicate digitally. When you're talking about digital transformation, you're not talking about, just using the tool. You're talking about business models changing. You're talking about cultural change to sustain this change in the business models. You're talking about supporting employees and customers from the standpoint of what their kind of, let's say their cultural requirements are as individuals as well as the corporate culture itself. And those are fundamental to all digital transformation. So if now that said, because people are using all of this, right, it started raising the question very seriously as opposed to just using the term because you're supposed to and it's cool marketing. And so you're starting to actually see some models beginning to change and, not so much on the cultural side, not seeing that too much yet, but I'll put it this way. What I keep hearing is we're at a sprint to the finish line for digital transformation. If my take on it very simply on it is we're at a sprint to the starting line for digital transformation.
All right, fair enough. All right, so if we're sprinting to the starting line, then Vikas, let me pose this question to you. What's impeding digital transformation? What are some of the hurdles that we have yet to overcome?
Yeah, picking up on Paul's sprinting to the finish line, maybe I'd use another tagline like digital transformation. There is actually no finish line. It just keeps going and going and going. But what I mean by that is putting on the technology lens on this. Obviously, the digital transformation initiatives have the right vision and the possibilities are endless. But with the possibilities come the choices that people have to make in terms of making their digital transformation pragmatic and real and achievable, right? A lot of things, when you open up the possibilities, like I'm going to use this service from a multi-cloud solution, I'm going to mix this, I'm going to add all of that together and create a solution that meets all of my needs. That's where, all the possibilities and the choices should be constrained. And a lot of time is being spent in projects where the digital transformation groundwork itself is taking a long time. So the purpose-built solutions and the transformation has to wait for the groundwork. And I think that needs to speed up. And that's where the right choices, the right mindset has to come in.
Gotcha. And actually, that's interesting, right? I mean, I know Vikas, and I'm sure Paul, you see this on a regular basis. I mean, there's where people want to get to, right? And that's the journey towards digital transformation, and there's the reality of where you're starting from, right? And I know that when you're looking at large enterprise organizations that have reached the pinnacle of their industry, you know, because at some point they presumably rewrote the book on transformation. Now they're fighting against the encroaching competitors who don't have all of that legacy infrastructure to deal with, right? I mean, you look at cloud versus on-premise. That's an ongoing discussion when it comes to digital channels, flexibility with integration, data management. I'm curious, Paul, what's your take on how easy it is? Are large organizations, let's put it this way, at a disadvantage to digitally transform versus net new companies, or do they all have their trade-offs at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. Look, the one factor I think that almost no company took into account because they couldn't because of COVID-19 is not the scale of transformation that has to occur, which, you know, I know large companies are going to be pretty extensive and a smaller company not so big, but the velocity of change that's necessary given the velocity of activity that's going on in combination with scale. And that, to me, that's actually, it becomes kind of a limiting factor in that the way most companies, let's say ideally, regardless of whether big or small, would like to digitally transform is under their control, right? Meaning we have this plan, we can follow the plan and effectively implement the plan. And then we get to the next stage and then we get to the next stage. Well, two things kind of at this point argue against that as happening, let's say, at least smoothly. Not that you shouldn't plan, you should. But one is the uncertainty of when this crisis is going to, let's say, at least begin to really seriously mitigate as opposed to end, because that's even more uncertain. And also the speed of change that's occurring. And because, you know, on the enterprise level, they're always slower to move. They are because of bureaucracies that are there. And even the interesting thing is I had a discussion a couple of days ago with somebody on the enterprise in crisis, right? And they were saying, well, how does that work in terms of enterprise sales? You know, and it goes to this, it's the same idea, right? Which is, yeah, of course, now if you're making a sale, you can sit at home and be on Zoom and wear a t-shirt, but that doesn't change any of the processes that go on to confirm that sale, to get the contracts in order, the negotiations. Those things haven't changed at all. The processes themselves remain the same, right? And even though they're just distributed differently. So it's the same with digital transformation right now. Unfortunately, the legacy processes are in place, right? And right now, because of the intensity of the crisis, not a lot of companies have either had the time or taken the time to do more than just maybe somewhat tweak and adapt those processes, rather than what you really have to do is just pretty much, and I'm being a little extreme here, throw them out and then rebuild, right? So I think that's a big problem.
So can you, all right, so following your train of thought there, can you digitally transform with everyone working from home? I mean, like you said, you've tweaked it so that people can maintain and at least sustain the current line of business, right? I mean, the processes haven't changed. It's just where you're maybe enacting them from. But since the overhaul is so significant, is that overhaul too much to do from home?
Pretty much it's going to be. It's not that it's impossible, but it's going to take a lot longer. And the other side of that is, keep in mind, you know, part of the cultural change necessary for that transformation is usually been driven by actual physical environments that people are in. This isn't an abstraction, you know. Physical isolation actually does impact cultural transformation. It slows it up, right? It's not that you can't do it. It just takes you a lot longer to do it. Why? Because could be that a lot of the employees involved in the process are, you know, feeding the baby, or they're walking the dog, or they're distracted in a lot of different ways. And the other side, and you've seen this in this crisis too, is those distractions are, and I'm using this again somewhat loosely, those distractions are more acceptable in a crisis. People are allowing for that more. But digital transformation takes a especially in the enterprise, takes a big effort with a lot of people, and the physical environment's actually somewhat helpful toward doing that. Again, is it impossible? No. Can it be done? It just, yes, but it'll take a lot longer.
So Vikas, I think that lends itself to another interesting question to you, right? So I know within the customer service industry, which you and I are both very familiar with, yourself as well, Paul, what we've seen is sort of this intent or desire for desegregation of different functions, right? I don't want to rely technologically on an external team or department to perform my responsibilities as a business owner, let's say, of a customer service group, right? I want to be able to own the digital workflows, the channels, the customer experience. And it's this experience and configuration over code mentality that we want to get to. So in one case, we're arguing that digital transformation, it's hard to do it from a distance, right? And I would agree with you, Paul. But then even when you do consolidate, the growing trend when it comes to digital transformation is having more autonomy at a business level. Would you agree with that, Vikas? And how do you achieve that?
Yeah, so you do want to, so if I was the CIO of a large enterprise, one of the things to take a pragmatic approach to digital transformation, all of my gray hair has taught me one lesson, it should be an evolution, not a revolution, right? Be pragmatic, know your organization. Do I have an organization that I can throw an army of engineers at a project, right? But certainly a lot of companies cannot afford to do that. So the main thing is you should probably look at various accelerators to your digital transformation, such as platforms that we all know about that exist out there and the ecosystems that they've built around them. So you get the potential benefit of starting off with a platform or a solution and an ecosystem, and you can pick the right solutions or the right business processes, giving the control to the business users, like you said, G, on customer service or sales or marketing. And there's a lot of choices within the ecosystem around a platform. So that's definitely a pragmatic approach to making sure that you're going with a trusted solution that has worked, and yet bring in your own customization and configuration to the rollout of the business processes. In customer service and customer experience, it's equally important, to have the business control the experience for the customers, as well as bring in all of the communication channels and all the workflows together to provide a unified face to our customers, right? So you can do that only by bringing together, the workflows as well as communication channels, right?
But
that's what digital transformation in customer service should aim for.
But that strategy would assume that an organization, look, I mean, I think I saw a crazy number very recently that said, and Paul, you can presumably back this up or provide some context, but I think that the average enterprise, whatever you want to consider average enterprise, let's say it's 1,000 employees or more, but large organizations on average have about 128 applications that they're running, and that's probably lowballing it, right? So to your point, Vikas, right, your strategy makes sense. You got to find a platform that has an ecosystem. Now, not all platforms can be all things to one institution, but it sounds like there's a consolidation taking place. Organizations want to shrink the number of platforms that they have down to the select few that as an aggregate have a large enough ecosystem to address all the different components that make up an organization. If I'm hearing you right, Vikas, I'm curious, Paul, in your experience, is that a trend that you see happening, starting, underway?
Well, I mean, it's been happening as far as it goes. I mean, this predates COVID. So, for example, several years ago, actually, Esteban Kolsky and I actually wrote quite a bit on ecosystems and platforms as being pretty much, if you're an intelligent company in any way whatsoever, either as a provider or as a customer, that's how you're going to be acting and thinking in terms of what's the platform, what's the ecosystem around that platform that will provide me with as much of my needs as possible. So, for example, for the provider, they're saying, okay, here's our platform. Here's the end-to-end need of the customer. Of that, on our platform, we natively can do this. We're building this. We can't do this, and we have no intention of ever doing this because it makes no sense for us. These things we'd like to do, but we'd rather have partners who have the capabilities to do that with us. And then from there, you make strategic decisions like, these are go-to-market partners, these we just need to connect to, et cetera, et cetera. We need integration. You know, when you see companies do that, they're being smart about this. And that's that idea, what Vikas pointed out on ecosystems and platforms, it's actually massively accelerated now, because there's another side to it, which is, even though that's still, you know, and especially in the largest enterprises, a fairly complex task, it's greatly simplified from the prior effort they're making. And right now, what people are looking for is as simplified an approach as they possibly can have, because there's so many other things on their minds that they have to deal with, including personal, right? And so when you talk to somebody about ecosystem and platform, they go, oh yeah, because they can grasp it, right? And they can understand it, and then they can see it in the context of their own needs. So this is something that has been there. We've seen increasing interest in, and again, on the side of providers like you guys, and on the side of customers that you might have, we're seeing that seriously accelerate during this crisis period.
So that's let me give you the final word on this topic then, piggybacking off of what Paul just said, because I think that aligns quite well with your sort of philosophy or theory of what's to come, right? We're talking about ecosystems, platforms, taking a platform that provides you a good basis from which to build in or add in components. And those components can be third parties that specialize in just those features, functionalities, outcomes. But again, with the platform being sort of the tying piece. Vikas, final thoughts?
Yeah, you know, it's like the analogy that I might use here is like an orchestra. The platform, the conductor of the platform is the conductor is the platform, and then the orchestra, you have to make sure all the components or all the pieces in the orchestra are playing music harmoniously together. Harmoniously is important, and making good music together as opposed to making a lot of noise. So how the components fit into the platform and whether they gel into the ecosystem, that is critically important. But yes, the right idea is, an ecosystem of musical instruments that fit into the orchestra, creating sweet music.
And of course, that I mean, every new company and or offering I see coming out, Paul, they all want to be a platform, right? Everyone wants. It sounds like no one wants to be the bolt-ons, but really there's value in being the bolt-ons, and there are those that can be very good at doing platforms, and there are people that are creating platforms or claiming to have platforms that really be better off being complementary assets to the ones that have already established themselves as platforms, right? I can think of a few. There's Dynamics is Microsoft is a platform, SAP, ServiceNow. I mean, most people I'm sure could guess what those are, right? Well, this is a really interesting topic, and I think we covered a good bit. I'm looking forward to our next session here on sort of the engagement layer that complements sort of the peripheral of what these platforms do when it comes to work management. Stay tuned.